The recent printing of John Holley's Invisible People of the Pikes Peak Region, an Afro-American Chronicle, has added an important dimension to our area's history. Fortunately, the term invisible is figurative, as shown by the illustrations from the book. A Civil War orderly to General Palmer, a cowboy, a riding instructor, a groom, an elected constable, a policeman, an orator, a teacher, an entrepreneur, a professional baseball player, a general, a social worker, a librarian, a bank guard, a jazz pianist, a doorman, a vice mayor, all emerged as Afro-Americans who contributed to the history of Colorado Springs. In a recent interview for the library, Ree Mobley, local history librarian, talked with John Holley about the book and the experiences that created it.
We're here to talk to you today to celebrate a very special occasion for you and for the community and for the Pikes Peak Library District and for the Friends of the Library. Your book is nearing completion. The Invisible People of the Pikes Peak Region, an Afro-American Chronicle. Would you tell us about the title of the book first, and then about how you wrote the book and why you wrote the book?
The title, The Invisible People of the Pikes Peak Region. Invisible people meaning people who've been ignored in the past by historians. So the histories that are now on the shelf for the Pikes Peak region make very little reference to the black population. So this is an attempt to make the invisible become visible. And I'm very grateful that the Friends of the Library and the Friends of the Pikes Peak Museum have agreed to make this possible for the community to see the book.
It's a book that's been long in the making, isn't it?
Yes, several years.
When did you first have the idea of writing a book?
I can't give you the exact time, but some years ago when I was with the Urban League, I wanted to do a little research to maybe write a pamphlet or something which could be distributed and would inform people about the minority population. And as I worked on that, the idea grew. I found there was so much information available in the library, museum, and so forth that I decided to do more than just a pamphlet. So that's how the book idea got going.
Is it based on, in addition to research, did you also interview people in the community?
Yes, it was done through interviews, through historic materials available through the library and the museum and other sources, old newspapers, periodicals containing information.
The experiences of a Houston boyhood and an education in the segregated society of the South made discrimination a fact of John Holley's early life. His later education and research at the Tuskegee Institute, New York University, and Fisk University gave him the understanding and scholarship to become a writer. John Holley's book reflects the truth of his experience as a government worker, soldier, journalist, activist, director of the Urban League, as well as the objectivity of a life dedicated to thought and fairness.
And you've been a writer for many years. You were a journalist early in your...
Well, journalist is kind of a fancy term. I did write for the newspapers. I wrote for a black weekly newspaper in Houston, my hometown. Did
you have any experiences when you were working for the newspaper in Houston? And you had the police beat, didn't you? When you went to the police station to find out what was happening?
Usually, I didn't wear a hat when I was covering things, but this summer it got very hot and I decided to wear a hat. And when I got into the police station and got on the elevator with my hat on, a white man told me to take my hat off. I just looked at him, I didn't take it off. So he repeated, "Take your hat off." I didn't do it, so he took it off from me. He tried to hand it to me, but I wouldn't accept it, so he dropped it on the floor. And I wrote that up in my newspaper as sort of pattern that sort of treatment that one could expect from the police department.
And didn't you say that when you left the elevator, you went out, I guess, through the parking garage, and there was another black man there who you knew and who you recounted this incident to, and what was his attitude?
Yeah, went down into the basement and saw this fellow. He was a fellow that I knew, a black fellow who worked down there. And I told him what happened to me. I thought he would share my concern. He said, well, no, you should have taken it off. So I was surprised.
When you were growing up and you first became aware of discrimination, and you wondered to yourself, and you asked someone, when you asked your mother, what was her answer to why things were the way they were?
Well, she recognized that things were not as they should be, but she would say, as people get better educated, the situation will improve.
And do you think that influenced your later attitude and patience and willingness to try to educate people?
To some degree, yes.
For John Holley, education was his path to success. He graduated with a bachelor's degree from the Tuskegee Institute and went on to get a master's in sociology from New York University. During the Roosevelt administration, he worked for the War Department. In Washington, D.C., he met his future wife, Ruth.
Your wife, Mrs. Ruth Holley, worked at the library and was a great friend and supporter of the library, as you are. Would you tell us a little bit about her activities in the community and her work with the library?
Well, she was a great book lover and a great promoter of books. While she was at the library, she was in contact with a good many people, and she could answer questions about what books were available in various subjects and so forth. And I think she did a good job in that direction, helping people know what's available, and so they'd understand the system.
John Holley moved to Portland with his wife, Ruth, and two young sons, Noel and Darrell, to work for the Urban League. In 1967, John Holley moved to Colorado Springs to direct the Urban League, thus beginning an illustrious career in the Pikes Peak region.
In the 60s, that's what most of us think is the most important, one of the most important decades of civil rights action. How did you see your role in that? Who else in the community was active? What other black people in the community were involved? Were there other leaders, other community leaders?
The NAACP was involved, and of course we were, during the 60s was the time of the hot summer, long hot summer, and so we wanted to be sure we didn't have any riots, that sort of thing as a result, so we worked to influence community leaders to listen and take whatever steps seemed necessary to see that people were not so discouraged that they would resort to those tactics.
Did you see a need for those tactics in some instances? I'm sure you understood the impatience of people. Did you think that some of those violent tactics were necessary to bring attention to the problems, or did you?
I didn't feel it was necessary. I felt that they could be avoided by taking certain steps, logical steps that would make more opportunities available, and that's what we encouraged. And if it were known that these things were going on, then it would discourage the negative sorts of things from happening.
As a historian, Mr. Holley, what would you like for John Holley to have told you about his life and his work and his experiences in 1991 when he looked back?
Well, it's always possible to accomplish the things that are worth accomplishing, and for people to get to understand each other better, to overcome the kinds of attitudes that lead to discrimination. These are things that the concern of agencies such as the League and the people such as myself, I'm happy that we don't run into, we don't run now smack into those kinds of attitudes, the negative kinds of attitudes, to a great degree, most of the time. But there's some people who do report from time to time that they have run into something that's negative. And so we'd like to see the negative things eliminated and people's attitudes not be influenced by race. So there's still room for education. There are those who still feel that they are justified in having negative feelings about people of a certain color. They tend to generalize and stereotype people. And I've worked to try to break down the generalizations and the stereotypes, which are negative attitudes about people.